Hi, I'm Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and welcome to the 2024 Texture Sampler Knit-Along, Part 1. We're going to get you into this thing, and actually started on the first section. Actually, we're going to just do the first section. So let's get started. You should have all your materials. How would you know what to get? Well, I already made an introductory video for the knit along and the crochet along. These two are running simultaneously. And if you're doing the crochet along, just know that this knit along, each section's going to take longer just because knitting takes longer. And this is not making the same thing as the crochet along. So make sure to watch that previous video, which will be linked in the description, because everything's always linked in the description. You will also need to get the written pattern, which you can find in two places. The first place is for free on my blog at phoenixgatecrafts.com. But if you want the version without all the ads, and it has the knit and the crochet along, both patterns together, you can go to my Etsy at etsy.com/shop/phoenixgatecrafts. You can also join my Facebook group, which is Phoenix Gate Crafts Group on Facebook. I know I'm very creative with the naming of things. With that, let's get started. For reals. So, first things first, get your main color. Mine is black. I like black. And I feel that since the sections that this is going to go in are very simple and everybody's probably done it if you're willing to tackle this, you don't need to see that many details in the black. Don't worry, the other colors are going to be a lot more visible. So what we need to do is we need to cast on 130 stitches. Now, if you're going to make something bigger, you're going to want to do a multiple of 24 plus 10. Same goes if you want to make something smaller. Also, please be sure that you got gauge, which is about 15 stitches per 4 inches. Stitch gauge matters, row gauge does not. And it doesn't have to be that precise. If it's a little off, who cares? You just kind of want a general vicinity for the size that I'm doing. But if you're doing a different size or you're doing a different yarn or whatever, you can calculate the size you need. Just make sure that at the end, the number of stitches you have is a multiple of 24 plus 10. You want to also make sure that whatever cast on and bind off you are using is a relatively loose one. So here's the thing. I like the Twisted German cast on. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to also tell you how I kind of guess about how much yarn I need. Now you do want a longer than usual tail. You want at least a foot, maybe closer to 18 inches or so. Just because that way you have something to sew up with. So go ahead and however long you want, I'm going to go with that. Then you start holding it from the back of the needle and you start wrapping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, scooch. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, scooch. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. A lot of people will tell you to do 10 stitches, and that is a pain in the ass if you're doing over 100 because you have to go up and down measuring like 10 times. If you do 50, you only have to do that like 2 more times. Now keep a hold here and keep a hold here and pull it off your needle. And then you can just oops, try not to pick up your needle when you do this, until it is straight. Now, leave the tail off and then, oops, grab and pull. Because you want such a long tail, and there we go. That is our starting point. It's going to be a little extra long, but that is okay because we need 130 stitches, not 150 stitches, but that extra 20 stitches can go into our sewing tail, and that will be perfectly handy. So over here is my yarn ball, proof it exists. And I'm going to keep my tail that way. Now, I try very hard not to do knots in knitting. You'll notice if you're also doing the crochet along that I totally do knots in crochet, but I try not to do them in knitting because you can see them so much easier. Just the way the loops behave, you don't hide them within the loops usually. I've got my slingshot, just like the long tail cast on. And then I go knocking into the camera, down, and twist forward, twist towards me, and that puts me into position. Now, there are better tutorials for how to do a twisted German cast on. I'm not really teaching you how. I'm just going to really quickly show you the method. You can use any cast on you like. Just make sure it's loose so you're not pulling your stitches in. But you go down underneath both, down your thumb, twist your thumb around, go around, and pull that loop from your pointer finger through, and then pull your thumb tight. So go around both, down your thumb, twist your thumb, around the one for your finger, pull it through the loop, close it. And there we have 3. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to count off 50. And then I'm going to put a stitch marker. Some people do 10, some people do 20. I think that's a lot of pausing. But I find that if I do 50, I can then count by 2s really quick and then put a stitch marker in that is easily removable, and then I will be set. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 49, 50. All right, make sure that one goes that way, and the tail goes that way. And then I count by 2s, just the loops, and I always start over here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, uh-oh, I get lost count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 46, 48, 50. Oops. I think the main reason I don't mind doing black is because you really can see the actual loops on my stainless steel needles. So that was 50. I'm going to get, I like these. You can pull them off if you need to. I know a lot of people don't like them, but I do. Now we're going to do another of 50, and then we're going to do one of 30. And here's the cool thing. When you do the next one of 50, all you have to do is start counting 50 from this stitch marker, because 50 plus 50 is 100, plus 30 is 130. I know you know that. I am really tired. It's really late when I'm recording this because I'm just so excited and I want to start this project. So, I will meet you back when you have 130 stitches. Alright, I have all the stitches on here. And I like to give them a little space just so that they're not super twisty or anything. So here I have a very long tail. Wound up a bit too long, but that is okay. Here's what I do about this because I don't want to accidentally cut it too short. I basically tie a bow, but I don't do a normal one because you can't do the half knot. So you just grab 2 loops and then you cross them and then cross 1 loop over the other. Little bow. You can, don't pull it too tight, but you can pull that out and now it's not nearly as long. And here's the cool thing, especially if you have dark yarn like I've got, the way you can tell what row you're on, if you're on an even or an odd row, is based on where this is. So we're going to do a garter section, and all that a garter section is garter stitch for 10 rows. Every single stitch is knit for 10 rows. And this is the perfect spot to double check your counting. And you'll know it's an odd row if your tail is, well, I'm right-handed and I'm doing this from right to left, so if your tail is on the right, you know that you're working on a row 1 or an odd row. And if this tail is on this needle or on the other end from the one you're working on, that is an even row facing you. And odd rows are the right side, so it's the outside looking side. So all we do is stitch every row, every stitch for 10 rows. And I always like to give this a little tug at the beginning. Now, do this for 10 rows. At the end, once you finish 10 rows and you turn it for the next row, this should be on the right-hand side. When we come back, I'll show you how to count up the 10 rows in garter so that you don't necessarily need a row counter every single time you do this. So if you just wait a second, I will show you that once I've actually stitched 10 rows of garter. So as you can see, I am back at the beginning and I have 10 rows of knit stitches completed. So I'm going to cut my yarn and show you how to easily count this up for future reference. So as you can see, this bottom right here, you can kind of see rows. And if you feel it, you can feel the bumpy texture. And that bumpy texture goes in rows. This right here on the bottom, with the front side facing me, this row right here is the cast on row. And then you can see that there are these double rows. When you kind of pull them apart, you can really see them pretty well. So here's one double-sided row, here's another, here's another, here's another, and then right underneath is a row of purls. Each one of these double-sided rows is counted as 2 because it's technically this row that comes out of our cast on, because the German twisted cast on doesn't actually create stitches, it just creates a bunch of purl bumps on the front side. And then each of these sets of 2 that you can see right there, that counts as 2. Now technically it's this row and that row that create this little V in between the bumps, that is technically 2. But that's harder to count because you're counting a recess instead of something that's sticking out. So I do it where I count this is 2, 4, 6, 8. And then this row of purl bumps right underneath, that is 10. Now, we could look at the back. This is the cast on row. And you wind up with this really big thicken compared to the thinnin right here. This thicken is the first 2 rows. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. But this gets harder when you're past the cast on because there's always like a little bit below and a little bit above when you're changing colors. So I find it a lot easier to count it this way, and you just realize that this purl row counts as 2. Regardless, now we are changing colors. So here's the thing. I don't like to weave in ends very much. So I do more a weave as I go as much as possible. That is not possible for every single half of every single color change throughout the entire pattern, but I'd rather have only 2 or 3 that I need to weave in at the end compared to all of them, because we're going to have like 12 color changes at the beginning and the end of each section. What I do is I do the weave and Steven methodology. So I pick up my new color. Make sure you got a little bit of it and you pull it off. Then you go and start your new one. Now pull both tight. And it's okay to be a little extra tight on the black. And then you just wrap it around and then do your next stitch. And then put it in, wrap it around. Your old color wraps around your new color, and then complete your stitch. Put it in, wrap it around. Stephen West came up with this. This is not my idea. I mean, I think I came up with it before I saw he did it, but he came up with it years before I came up with it. So, great minds think alike sometimes. Now, you do that for 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you don't have to do this, but if you are somebody who likes to have stitch markers, because otherwise you're going to just blow past a stitch, put on a stitch marker. I want this one to demark that this is the right hand side when the right side is facing. And then we're just going to do knit stitches all the way across, and I'm going to weave in Steven until I run out, which is going to be a few inches. And that is perfectly okay, because the longer I do this, the better woven in it is. Now, if you want this really secure, it's a good idea to go back and split your yarn, and that ain't coming out. It also ain't going to be stretchy. So I like this, especially if you do it for several inches. It's not very likely to come out. And if it does come out a little bit, it's not going to make or break any projects. And in case you are wondering, yes, we did leave the blue one. We're going to come back, and then on the round after that, that's when we're going to weave this one in. So go ahead and continue knitting, whether you're weaving Stevening or not, until you have 5 stitches left at the end. This goes so much faster once you finish doing the weave and Steven. Now just a quick note, we will always start a color change on the right side, and we will always start with a knit row where all the stitches on that row are knits. It creates a nice straight line for the color change. Also, sometimes having a little bit of a breather before the new pattern actually makes it a little bit easier to see the pattern, especially since color changes happen on the next row that we're going to knit. So the next row we're going to knit is going to be the first one that's going to show this color underneath our needles. And then after that, all of the stitching happens in the row below the needles. Everything, these loops that are on the needles, are not technically stitches yet. They're just loops. Once we actually do something to them, be it a knit, a purl, or whatnot, that's when it becomes a stitch. Right now, they're just loops. They're ready to become stitches, and we need those in order to make the stitches. So that's why dealing with color work is a little bit funky depending on where you do the color change. Typically you want to actually change over to the next color on the row before you want the color to actually show up. Not that any of that information really matters in this pattern, because I have that all figured out for you. So anyway, I'll see you 5 stitches from the end. All right, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches left. We're going to put the other marker on if we're using it. So the edges, both sides to the marker, are going to be knit no matter what. So to the left and to the right. Every single row all the way across. We're going to knit the first 5 and the last 5 stitches, and the pattern just happens in the middle section. So we're going to always start with 5 stitches knit. And if you look at the pattern, it is very boring. The first 5 stitches are written on every single row as knit. All right. And then we're going to purl to the other side. Every single stitch to the other stitch marker. So I will meet you back here at the other side. We're back at the other stitch marker. So we're going to slip it, and we're going to knit the last 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm just going to let you know that throughout this piece, I'm just going to call this a purl row. I'll probably show it pretty much every time until I get completely bored of it. But just so you know about that. Oh, also, quick piece of identification. You see how we have these little color blips right here? This is from the color change, where we've got the little bits of blue on a row and then little bits of black. So the second color and then the first color, and then the rest of the section is going to be the new color. This is always going to be the wrong side, or the back side, or the inside, not the one that's going to face the world. So this is going to be the private side, as I call it. Most people aren't going to see this side. And that's how you can tell if you are on the wrong side for the visual pattern. Okay? Make sense? It's going to matter more in different patterns than this one in later sections. But this one is fun. It is easy. I think it's a good starter one. This is a good pattern for if you want to do something quasi-brainless, when you're in front of the TV. So, of course, 5 stitches, but since we're on the second go around, we're going to weave and steven this one, or at least I am. You are, of course, welcome to do whatever you want. But always just knit the first stitch, and then you can start doing weave and steven on the second stitch. Otherwise, it just kind of creates this extra thick, funky thing. Whoa, uh-oh. All right. So that just happened. Stick it back, stick it back, and we now have a problem. Okay. So if you're ever in this situation, and this is supposed to be a purl stitch here, get this on, and put this one on over it. So you want the spare piece running behind. Sorry, you want it in front, because what you're going to do is just stick your needle under both and pull it through the other loop. And now we have a purl stitch that we can put back. Pretty neat. And you can see I already have the weave and steven wrapped around. So we can just knit it and then continue on our merry way. And, you know, friggin' hold on to our needles. So we always knit the first 5. We will get to a point where I will stop mentioning that, because we're always going to knit the first 5 and the last 5 regardless of what side we're on. Just creates a nice garter stitch edging. Alright, so now we're getting into the actual new stitch. And see how we only have 1 row under here in our new color. Alright, so we are going to continue doing a weave and steven for this. So we're going to twist our yarn before we go in, because we're going to do a yarn over. And then we're going to knit 2 stitches. So the first one, we don't wrap for our weave and steven, and on the second one, we will. I swear this will make sense later. And remember, you don't have to worry about it if you're not doing a weave and steven. Just do the stitches without doing the weave and steven. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that yarn over and we're going to bind it off. It says in the pattern to slip it over the 2 knit stitches. And that's why it doesn't matter if we do the weave and steven on this pattern, because it's still a thick one and we're not going to see it through any holes. So then we're going to do our weave and steven. And yarn over, and then knit 2. I'm doing my last weave and steven here on the second knit 2, and then pull the yarn over the other 2 stitches. It does create nice little pairs. Now I'm not going to do the weave and steven, so you can see what you can do without the weave and steven. So you yarn over, knit 2, and then pass the yarn over off. So, and don't forget the yarn over, knit 2, and you can tell the yarn over because it's got a little bit of space under here, that because there's no stitches that it's going into or coming out of. Pass it over, and we're just going to do this all the way across to the other marker. So I will see you at the other end. All right, So we've made it to the last marker, and of course we're going to just knit off the last 5 stitches. But before we do that, I do want to have a look and show you that with the yarn overs that have been passed over the other 2 stitches, or bound off, depending on how you want to look at it, I want you to notice that you can see that 2 stitches wind up kind of inside the bind off, and it kind of groups them. This stitch is called the bamboo stitch, and this was the first row of a 2-row repeat. And the second row is really easy, and we've actually done it before. So let's just real quick. One, two, 3, 4, 5. Turn. Always make sure that when you turn, your yarn is under your needles. That way you don't get any weird accidental yarn overs that you wind up stitching into and adding to your stitch count. We are going to add a few stitches later in a different video, but we're not doing that right now. But what we are doing is we are knitting those first 5 stitches. And now we're going to purl to the last marker. Doop-a-doo, doop-a-doo, doo, doo, doo. And you will notice that it looks kind of like there's this weird space between them. That is normal. It's just from the bind off. That's kind of separating them into their own little things. Make sure you don't accidentally grab up 2. It can be easy, especially if your 2 wind up doing it. You can wind up accidentally purling 2 together. Don't do that. Make sure you're just doing 1. Since I'm nearing the end of the purl row, I want to make sure to mention something that's just a piece of delicate knitting advice. It's not delicate. It involves yanking. I was being a snarky person. So when you make a purl, a lot of people don't like switching from knitting in the round to knitting flat because the purls can look different when you knit flat. Because originally you were doing nothing but knits and then purls. But you'll notice that what I do is after a purl, I always kind of pull it forward on my needle and pull it back on my hand. And what that does is it tightens the purl stitch. See how loose that is? There's a lot of space under there. That typically doesn't happen when we do knit stitches. So I pull and tighten that. And then I go back and see how little space underneath there is afterwards. That will make your purls have the same tension as your knit stitches. And if you do that after every single one, if you're doing something like ribbing where you're switching from knits to purls, it's going to look a lot tighter and neater. It's just one of those nice little delicate things, and it will come up in later sections when we do more purls that aren't just a purl row. And now I'm at the end. I've got my last 2 stitches. And whoop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, put it under, turn it around. That is the 2-row repeat, and you notice how that kind of brings it kind of funky. By the way, this stitch that we're doing is called the bamboo stitch. I didn't put it in the pattern. I got it from a book whose stitch names are pretty... Not sure if some of them are naturally the normal name for them, because some of them are like diagonal number 2. And I think it's just because it's the second diagonal pattern in the book, you know, or the section. But anyway, this one definitely does look like little bamboo stalks, particularly organized little bamboo stalks. They don't normally look quite that organized in like a field of bamboo. But we're going to knit 5 stitches to start with, because we always start and end with 5. And I'm just going to do a few of the normal bamboo stitch pattern. So you yarn over, knit 2, pull the yarn over, and don't forget to yarn over again. I do recommend, you know how I checked at the end of a row to see if I missed any? I do recommend checking at the end of a row to see if you missed any, because it's a lot easier to tink back versus fix it on the next row, especially if you wind up with like one extra stitch or something funky. All right, this is the last one I'll show you, but I wanted to show you something else because we're going to repeat this. We're going to do a repeat, do this yarn over, and then do the purl row, alternating until you have 10 total repeats. And there's a really easy way to count them up, because you see this little stitch right here that goes across. It's the yarn over that we pulled over. You just count those. Once you have 10 of those, 1, 2 is what we have now. You have 10 of those. You finish the last purl stitch, you meet back on the front side or the right side, depending on how you want to think of it. I think of it as front and back. Also, if you want, feel free to cut this little tail. I put my scissors somewhere, I have to find them. But just know that now that we've gone this far in, we can cut it and it'll be fine. And yeah, that's what that's going to look like. It's really nice and a squishy pattern. So I'll see you once you've done 10 total repeats. All right, welcome back. And your piece should look pretty much like this. I've got mine folded in half at the moment, but you should have garter on the bottom. Continue with the garter up each of the sides. And then the way you can tell that you've done a total of 10 repeats is you can count these little sideways diagonal lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then it looks like you've got kind of one more row sticking out. That's the last purl side, and we are back to the top. I cut my yarn because now I'm ready to cast on or change colors. There we go. Back to my main color. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do another garter section. So in the pattern, it is just written as garter section because I wrote it at the very beginning of the pattern. I will have it written out in every section of the blog pattern if you are going the free route. So, I really don't think I need to show you how to do garter again. Friendly reminder for those of you who are a bit newer, garter is knitting every stitch for 10 rounds in this case. But I'll take this opportunity to show an easy weave and Steven. We're not dealing with a different stitch pattern at the same time. I always start the weave and Steven with the old yarn, which can get a little confusing if you're not changing colors. But you just take it, switch it around. Doesn't matter if you go top to bottom or bottom to top, though top to bottom is easier for me. And you just keep doing it until you run out of yarn. I always like to give mine a little tug sideways because that will actually make it so that that tail end kind of gets hidden a little bit better. Now I know some people prefer to weave in a few different directions when they weave in ends. That is totally fine. This is not a requirement. This is just my preference. I will at some point have a video on how I prefer to weave in ends if I'm not changing colors in the middle of a piece. But that's a different video that may or may not have come out by now. If it has, I'll link it in the description box. It's on the list, and I am recording this well in advance. So, I will see you. So, with that, I will see you at the end of 10 rounds, and we will go over at that time how to count up your garter stitch rows. Rows, not rounds. So, with that, I will see you at the end of 10 rows of knit stitches. All right. I have the last garter stitch section for this portion. And as you can see, it's actually pretty easy to count up because you have these rows of 2 bumps that go up and down and up and down and up and down. So just like earlier down here, we only need 5. And just like before, we're going to count all of them up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then these under here are 5. I know it only looks like half, but as you can see, you've got an upper, a lower, an upper, a lower, an upper, a lower. And it goes across. This is all you need. This is 10 rows. And I started back. I did cut my yarn already. I was basically out as it was. And we are ready to start the next section, which will be in the next video. It does help to know that you're not going to have to do 2 garter sections anymore. That was just because we were starting. All the others, you'll just know when you're at the end because you've completed your garter section and then you're ready for the next section. With that being said, please subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you can be notified when the next video in the series drops. Happy crafting, and